What's up and welcome back to another video. All right, so you guys saw the title. This week we're building on my previous video, which was color management part 1. And this is gonna be part 2, expanding on everything that we learned in the prior video. Now, if you haven't gone and checked out part 1, I highly encourage you to pause this video and go check out that one, because that introduces color management and we talk about some concepts that I think you need to know for this video. I'll link it up in the cards and I'll also put it in the description down below. So pause this one, go watch that one, and then come back to this one and watch it all the way through. So that way you get everything that we're talking about. So go now. Just kidding, I wasn't really paused that, but did you think I was? Because I probably had like 1 or 2 of you going at least, right? All right, so if you just watched part 1, this week is gonna be part 2. We're talking about ACES, we're talking Davinci, wide, gamut, intermediate. We're talking how to do those things in Resolve, which we're gonna jump into Resolve and I'll show you how to do both of those things. 2 different ways actually. And then we're gonna talk about choosing the proper color management solution for you. It's not really a one size fits all, nor do I think that there's necessarily a right answer. I think a lot of this is gonna depend on your workflow, your preference, the kind of stuff that you're working with, how many people are involved, whether they have standards that they need to adhere to. Like for example, if you're dealing with VFX vendors, they may do ACES linear. It's probably better for you to work in ACES in that case. But like I said, it's not necessarily a one size fits all solution, but we'll talk about that at the end of the video. And stay tuned all the way to the end, because I actually do have a tip for you that we kind of circle back around to as well. So now, before we get started though, if you guys haven't done so already, please hit the subscribe button down below. It's free to you guys and it helps me out so much, especially in growing this channel, which I really want to do and grow with you guys. I can't actually believe that we're about to hit 600. Not that close, but we're getting close to like 600. So I can't wait until the channel hits 1,000 though. I'm really gonna I don't even know what I'm gonna do, to be honest with you, but it's hard to believe that after I don't know, I'd say probably about a year of trying to upload stuff consistently and really going hard at color grading and Davinci Resolve and stuff like that, we are where we are. So thank you to all of you, especially all the new subscribers and the guys that have stuck around from the very beginning. Hit the subscribe button though, hit the like button, share this video, get it out there so that we can keep growing the channel. Thanks. So last video we talked about what color management is and why it's important. We're taking all the data recorded by the camera, usually in a log or a raw format, and we're applying a technical and mathematical transform to that image to get it into a working color space and then a display color space. The process ensures the integrity of the image throughout the post-production pipeline. No matter how many vendors we're handing off our work to, we can ensure it'll always come back and we can transform it back to what we need. So first, how do we accomplish that? Well, we have 2 places where we can do it. One is a non-color managed workflow in Davinci Resolve. What does this mean? I thought you said we were color managing. Right, well, non-color managed just means we're telling Resolve that we don't want it to do anything for us. Don't transform our footage on the way in, don't mess with it, don't transform it on the way out. We'll do everything manually. In project settings, you can look under color management, and if you pick that option, you'll be in Davinci YRGB. There's only one other option here, and that's timeline color space. Okay, so pause real quick. Huge note here about timeline color space in project settings. This isn't your delivery format. This isn't the format that you're trying to get to. So most of the time, for example, if you're uploading to the internet, you're trying to get to Rec 709. Your timeline color space is not that. What your timeline color space does is it ensures that in a non-color managed workflow, which means it's not being managed by Davinci Resolve, your tools, like for example, your primaries wheels, your HDR color palette, and so on and so forth, work properly in terms of color and contrast, color space that you're working in on your timeline. So just keep that in mind. It's a very important distinction. So think of your timeline color space basically as your working color space. You want to make sure that your working color space, like we had in the first example between the first node and the second node where we're going to do our grading, you want to make sure that that matches what you're actually working in, right? So if you picked ACES, make sure your timeline color space is also ACES. So that way your tools behave appropriately when you're grading in between your input transform node and your output transform node. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, so I'll leave that for now, but we'll come back to it. Keep what we just talked about, though, in mind. So looking at our image, no transforms are applied. We're still log, right? You can tell it's flat. There's no contrast. This is where color space transform comes in. We're going to work towards a color managed project as we always want to do, but we're going to have to do it all manually because we told Resolve don't help us. We have an ACES transform to get us into ACES color space, and we also have color space transform, which has many more options as well. So let's do the most basic color management here that we can do in Resolve, and that's dragging this ACES transform over. So input transform is the first option. That simply means what are you coming from? What format should this transform be looking for? Now, output means what is it going to transform our Alexa footage into? Right now, I want ACES CCT, so let's pick that. All right, great. So we have our first transform. We're taking Alexa footage and turning it into ACES CCT. Now, TVs can't output ACES CCT. We don't watch shows in ACES CCT, and we're still looking pretty flat here if we look at our image. Since we're working manually, we need to add a final transform node as well. So we got to a working color space, but how do we get to Rec 709, for example? Let's Alt-S to add another node here, and let's drag another ACES transform over. Same process, but a little different. What are we coming from here? This time, it's going to be ACES CCT. We have our first node ingesting Alexa and outputting ACES CCT. So logically, we're going to need the output ingesting ACES CCT that we're going to be working in between these two nodes. It's being fed in to it, and let's output or tell it that we want to output Rec 709. So there's our most basic transform and color management pipeline. We have one input node getting us to a working color space where we can work in ACES CCT, and then an output getting us to where we want to go, in this case, Rec 709. That's what we want to deliver for. Now, this could change. You could be delivering for cinema. You might be looking at P3 DCI or Rec 2020 if you're grading for HDR. That output can change depending on what your delivery needs are. So what about not doing this process manually, right? I hear you. This is a manual process. We can do this in project settings as well. If we go to project settings here, we have a color management tab. That's where we'll be doing our color management. But I think it's important for you to understand these steps so that you really get what's going on behind the scenes. Let's say I'm choosing ACES CCT again, but this time through project settings. So let's go there. Instead of non-color managed Davinci YRGB, Resolve actually has a preset for ACES CCT, so let's pick that. Here we have familiar sounding options, so our input transform again will be Alexa, since that's what we're coming from, right? That's what our clip is. Now, output here is where do we want to go? So in this case, let's do Rec 709. You hit save, and there you go. Now we can grade here, and we're in ACES CCT with our final output going to Rec 709. You can't visually see the transform here in the node graph since it's being taken care of by Resolve now, but essentially it's the same process. Let's quickly touch on Davinci Wide Gamut, as that's one that people are exploring a lot more nowadays. Once you understand the concepts though, the process is fairly similar. So project settings again, but this time we're going to Davinci YRGB color managed. Let's uncheck automatic color, and in the dropdown, let's do custom. These automations are hiding the very things we need to be able to understand the process. So I think it's important that we do custom first to understand the behind the scenes. And then if you need a preset that you know you can easily choose from later on that works for your process, then you can choose that. When we do that, a whole slew of options appear to us though. Slightly different terminology, but widely the same application and result. So input color space is the equivalent of input transform. So again, we're going area Alexa log C. Timeline color space is our working color space. So here we're going to go with Davinci Wide Gamut Intermediate. Then you can set your timeline working luminance. So for SDR, it's 100 nits. Output color space is the ACES output transform. So we're going to go with Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. So let's hit save. All right. Slightly different result if you notice the change in the background here on the image, but we're now working in a color managed setting in Davinci Wide Gamut Intermediate. We can proceed to grade here, and looking at our Rec 709 output we're mastering for. Okay, so what's the difference? How do you know what to pick? Honestly, the difference isn't as important as picking a format and sticking to it. They both give slightly different results on the transform, but by and large, they are both a color managed framework that takes your scene referred image or your sensor image and transforms it accurately to a display referred environment. That's where you want to go. So that would be Rec 709 in our case. We want to ensure we're color managing our projects accurately, but which one we go with is sometimes more a product of the project we're working on and the different demands there are, or just personal preferences. Davinci Wide Gamut right now is future-proofed. If you look at the CIE graph that I had in my first video in part 1, it's a much bigger and capable working color space than even ACES currently. I know ACES is working on ACES 2.0, which I'm sure will also future-proof itself even more. All right, so super important. Last thing, we want to make sure we right click here on the clip and we make sure our input color space matches our camera. So this one is already Area Log C, but if it wasn't, I'd just come up here and select that one. If you have a whole timeline of that, you could easily just Control A to select all and then do the same thing. And lastly, if you're in Davinci YRGB here, I said I'd come back to timeline color space. Resolve here doesn't know what we're coming from or where we're going and what color space we're working in. So we have to specify that for it. Let's say we have our ACES workflow back here and we're grading in the middle. We want to go and tell Resolve we're working in ACES CCT. That way our tools behave properly and we get the desired results when using our tools. This setting affects how your tools behave, especially tools like our wheels, our HDR color palette, for example. So it's very important we specify correctly before we begin grading. Otherwise, you'll change it in the middle and your grade will look completely different. All right, so that's it for this week. Now, this week we talked about a lot of stuff, right? We covered a lot of ground. We talked about ACES color management. We talked about Davinci Wide Gamut. We talked about how to set those things up through non-managed workflows using just our color space transforms, which is a very viable way of working. I actually prefer that way because I can see exactly what's happening between input transform and output transform. Now, project settings can do the same thing. I just wanted to make sure that you guys understood the principles behind what project settings is doing. So that's why I showed you the manual way. And that's why we also covered how to do it in project settings so that you knew what all of the options meant. So neither way is particularly bad. You can do it either way, whichever way actually works better for you or whichever way you prefer. And that's just going to take some time playing around with the different settings and figuring out what works best for you. Now, this is just laying the groundwork for our color grading work. By no means are we done color grading just because we've color managed our projects. Essentially, this is just to get us to a starting point, a starting baseline where we can then build our creative grade on top of a properly color managed workflow, which is essential in today's world, trying to keep the codecs and the workflow post-production consistent. So from here, you'll want to do your creative contrast adjustments, your color adjustments, use any LUTs potentially that you have or that you want to use. Your creative grade goes on top of what you've done to set up the project. All right, so this is going to be an ongoing topic. We're going to keep talking about color management throughout different videos that I do in the future. So these concepts are very important to learn because this is literally the basis of your color grading and how to make sure that your projects are managed correctly. So make sure that you're subscribed, especially if you learned something or you found this video entertaining at least. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, comment down below, share this video, and get it out there so that people can see it as well. Until next time though, go out there and create something. La Vedere.